Hello chocolate friends, Carla here from Opening Chocolate. Today I have quite the tale for you about how a $65 chocolate bar made with the rarest cacao came into being. It weaves all over the world and involves some of the most interesting people in the craft chocolate industry. We're going to be talking and tasting this bar, Caputo's Wild Criollo 70% chocolate bar, and here are the people that were involved in getting this into my hands. First up, we have Jacob Marlin, the founder of BFREE in Belize, which stands for the Belize Foundation for Research and Environmental Education. His organization is the source of the cacao. Second, we have the Heirloom Cacao Preservation project that formed in 2012, whose mission is to discover, identify, and preserve the fine flavor heirloom cacao varieties for the conservation of biological diversity and the empowerment of farming communities. Next, we have Yelena and Matt Caputo. They are the owners of Caputo's Deli and A Priori Distribution in Salt Lake City. Matt and Yelena have been working for years to bring fine flavor cacao to the world. And fourth, we have Domantas from Naive Chocolate in Lithuania. He is the one that actually produced the beans into the bar Caputo is selling today. I've not yet tasted this bar, and I'm going to taste it here for the first time with you, which I don't normally do. And lastly, we have Rowan Jacobson, a James Beard award-winning author and journalist who went on a trek to find wild cacao and documented it all for us in his book. He's written other books on food, including this one from 2003 when craft chocolate was beginning to really get going in the US. And he also has a podcast called Wild Chocolate, which is basically this book experience, but like you were there. Of course, there are many other people that were involved, a few of which I will mention, but these are the major players in this chocolate that I'm going to talk about today. Where to start? Thousands of years ago, when indigenous people selected for varieties of cacao that they preferred, like Criollo, maybe that's too far back. Let's start in Belize. Okay, so Jacob Marlin's expedition into the Belizean rainforest in 1993, he was with a guide, and his guide pointed out a wild cacao tree. He didn't think much of it at the time, but they ate it because they were hungry. That trip in 1993 changed the trajectory of his life. Within 2 years, Jacob started the nonprofit BFREE, securing over 1,000 acres of reserve bordering 4 protected areas. He was living in a tent in the jungle with his family and building the foundation for a world-class field station and reserve. In the beginning, it was all about conservation of this pristine rainforest, but they now also have a research field station and, of course, are growing cacao amongst other worthwhile endeavors. As they grew BFREE, they found other wild cacao on the property. In 2001, Belize got slammed by a hurricane, and his staff said it would be a great time to plant more wild cacao so it could be harvested. In 2011, they hired Elmer Tislam, who had been trained at CATI, which is an agricultural research station in Costa Rica. They hired him to look after the cacao. They spent years developing the agroforestry system, and during that time, they noticed that the cacao trees they had particularly thrived in shade, even producing more in the shade. I don't know what made them decide to test the cacao, but in 2015, BFREE sent samples to the Heirloom Cacao Preservation Project to have them genetically tested by the USDA. The testing was sponsored by Caputo's, probably partly, at least, from the funds from one of their annual chocolate festivals that they have in Utah. The results could not have been more shocking and exciting. If you don't know, cacao is a very promiscuous plant. It will cross-pollinate with any cacao tree it is close to. So most of the cacao growing is a mix of different genetic varieties. Here are the genetic profiles of some other HCB designees that you may have heard of. Maya Mountain, Alto Beni, Hacienda Limon. Do you see how they're all they have all different kinds? They're made up of different bits in the pie, in the genetic pie. So here is the one for the BFREE cacao. What? This is really spectacular and shocking. For any biological organism, let alone an easy crosser like cacao, to be 100% is crazy. And on top of that, 100% Criollo. This just goes to show how valuable protected areas are, because we don't even know what is in there. They speculate that the ancient people who inhabited the area brought it with them, and it stayed pure due to its isolation in the rainforest. The fact that they were lost in the jungle was what kept them unique. When it was designated as HCP cacao number 11, they started to think about commercial production. In 2018, they had 200 pounds of wet beans they had gathered over 5 months. They fermented and dried them at BFREE and ended up with 80 pounds of dried beans. Then they collaborated with Guitard to make 225 bars. And Jacob showed up at a Fine Chocolate Industry Association meeting in San Francisco. He had those bars that he was selling for $50. Yelena and Matt Caputo were at the meeting. They bought and tried a bar. They were instantly intrigued and wanted to work with him to bring it to a wider audience. Only there was a problem. They simply didn't have enough cacao, not enough beans yet. They had about 300 wild trees they found in 2010, and they were still finding them in the forest. At first, they were harvesting them by backpack. Can you imagine beans in the backpack? When they started to farm the trees, they purposefully began grafting new trees. Now they have over 10,000 grafted trees and have even created their own chocolate company called Criollo. It's not just the genetics that make these beans special. They're a white Criollo bean that has 58 to 59% cocoa butter content, which is a little bit higher than most. Most beans hover around 50%, some as high as 54-ish. This one's much higher. And interestingly, the cocoa butter in the beans actually has a lower melting point than other cocoa butters. BFREE has its own fermenter, tiny little fermentation boxes, less than 2 feet square. The beans have very little pulp and hardly any drains off, so there's no extra to collect. The baba or pulp also has a milder flavor than other cacao. The beans are fermented for only 3 days, 3 to 3.5 days. That is half the time of normal fermentation. So unique. So in 2024, Jacob called Matt and said he finally had enough beans. 200 pounds of beans went to Domantas Opsalis at Naive Chocolate, and if you follow Matt Caputo on Instagram, you could have seen all of this playing out as they visited BFREE, and then they visited Domantas in Lithuania. Matt and Yelena chose Domantas because they were familiar with his bars and the flavors he can bring out in nanolots. The first run was 250 bars. The packaging was chosen to match the others in their preservation project. It debuted early in 2025 at an online with Jacob, the Caputos, and others who are integral into the cacao, the preservation of wild cacao. So let's taste this bar. We're going to do it together. I don't normally taste on camera, but we will taste and we will look at the packaging, and then I will come back and talk a little bit more about Rowan Jacobson and how he got involved in this project. So let's flip the camera around and try out this $65 Wild Criollo chocolate bar. All right, here it is, the Wild Criollo bar. It's a 70% cacao bar, sponsored by Caputo's and their heirloom Caputo's Preservation Project and HCP. Let's see what else. Pure Belizean Criollo cacao. We now know 100% Criollo. That's still mind-boggling. That and produced at Chocolate Naive. Let's see what it says on the back. Pure Criollo cocoa mass, cane sugar, and cocoa butter. So it does have a little bit added cocoa butter. Let's open it up. This packaging matches their other wild cacao bars. So you have the one that Louisa Abram does from the Jura, and the one that Volker Lerman does from Tranquilidad. He actually met the person who does the packaging, designed the packaging from one of the chocolate classes that he has at Caputo's. So let's open this one. Okay, cool. So we've got a map. There you can see that's where BFREE is. That's the shiny stuff underneath. All the proceeds from this bar, the 100% profits from this bar, go back to BFREE. So Belize, you have Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico. So it's in the Gulf of Mexico. It is here, the Caribbean Sea. Okay. In each of their wild cacao bars, you get a little Guardian of Wild Cacao card. All right, let's check out the bar. There it is. It's got using the same mold that the others do. All right, I'm gonna flip it around and we'll taste it on camera. I don't normally do this. See how it goes. So here's the bar that you saw. Let's break it. It's got a good snap. It's a little bit soft for a 70%, but that's okay. Also, take a look at this color. It's light. If you had handed this bar to me and I didn't know what it was, I would have guessed a milk chocolate. That's the color of this bar versus a dark chocolate. The snap too is also more reminiscent of a milk chocolate bar. No milk though. So remember, these beans have a little bit more cocoa butter than other cacao beans, but also they've added cocoa butter. So I'm just going to warm it up a little bit so the cocoa butter releases the volatile compounds. This reminds me of smelling beans that are like just going into the roasting process, or beans that have been out in the sun and are warm when they're drying. Mild chocolate, a little bit of nuttiness. All right, here we go. Let's taste it. Sorry for the ASMR that's going to happen with the mic. So initially there's a sweetness to it. It has a slower melt than I expected from the cocoa butter. It's slightly So it's got a little bit of the pleasant bitterness, only mild though. But then as I'm almost finished the melt, I'm getting fruity notes. Like a cherry or a blackberry. I'm going to taste it again. I'm going to chew it first. I'm going to taste it again, and then I'll come back to you. Okay, so I've tasted it a couple of times. Initially, this is not what I expected from a Criollo. It's interesting. In my head, I kind of had like a Chihuahua, Porcelana flavor note in there. And I get those, but this is also something a little bit more. So you get the nuttiness. It's creamy. It doesn't melt quite as quickly as I thought it would. It's got average fine melt, but I just thought it would be, with the added cocoa butter and the extra coconut, I thought it would be different, which is fine. There's no problem with it at all. Just my expectations were different. I get a initial like lightly bitter chocolate note, which as it melts, it develops into this nuttiness and almost like a tart cherry fruitiness. As it leaves my mouth, the finish is persistent and has a little bit of nuttiness, a little bit of that pleasant bitterness to it, and it's continuing, so it's hanging out in my mouth for a long time. All right, so that is Caputo's wild cacao bar. I lobbed off the top there and ate that. I'm just gonna have another bite while I get the book to get ready to tell you about what that book has to do with this bar and the others in the Caputo's Preservation Project. So I'll be back. All right, so what does this book have to do with the bars? So this bar, the Criollo, is featured in the book. He tells the tale of how it comes into existence, where it comes from. He travels with Volker Lerman, who is the person behind the Cacao Tranquilidad in Bolivia, and tells you some interesting tales about Volker, who is a character. And then he also travels with Louisa Abram, who is behind this wild Amazonian Brazilian cacao, Jura. And yeah, so here's this book. He had a 2003 book about chocolate, and then he has this one. So Rowan Jacobson, he's a James Beard award-winning author who is a food, science, and nature writer. He had known about craft chocolate for years since he wrote this book in 2003 that touches on some of the things of interest to craft chocolate geeks like me. But one bite of a single origin bar he wanted to chase down the cacao supply chain down through history, and he was not kidding. He flew into the drug-growing jungles of Bolivia and traveled down the Amazon, getting eaten by bugs, all in the name of finding elusive wild cacao. And he actually tells the tales of how the makers and growers and of those 3 bars in the Caputo's Preservation Project came into being. So if you follow me on Instagram, you know that I post books on there, and you'll often see I have tabs dotting my pages of where I found something interesting to me. And you'll notice I don't have any on this book. That doesn't mean it was a bad book. This is an excellent book, and any chocolate lover will find it enthralling. And that's what happened to me. I just wanted to read it. I just wanted to be in the moment with him in the jungles, on the river, experiencing the same things he was. It was just a delight to read. And I didn't want to take notes. Maybe when I go back again and read it again, I'll take notes again. But this time, I just wanted to enjoy it as it was and learn about how some of my favorite chocolate makers and cacao growers are sourcing, and the events and things they have to go through to get those chocolate bars into my hands. So it's actually a really amazing read, and I highly recommend this book for anyone who has even a modicum of interest in chocolate. As far as the other two bars, they've been around for a while. The Louise Abram bar, the Wild Jura, I think has really improved since I first tasted this. When I first tasted her Jura bar, I thought it was interesting, but it had some issues. Now it's really one that I enjoy eating. It's got an interesting flavor profile. It's complex, and I think there's been really some improvement on the processing end that allows her to not have to deal with off flavors that may come in there, and allows her to have the cacao shine. So this bar has really improved since I first tasted it, and I would recommend trying this one. Getting all three, you can order all three from Caputo's to enjoy them while you're reading the book. The Tranquilidad is a famous one. It's won awards by other when used by other makers. This one is produced by Ritual Chocolate in Utah. So also an interesting one to explore in addition to the Wild Criollo bar. So that's it. The $65 chocolate bar. Here it is. So I would highly recommend for sure reading the book. If you can't afford the chocolate, at least read about the story, because it's a fascinating story. And if you're interested, you can go on to the Heirloom Cacao Preservation webpage, and you can see the designees that they have. I believe they have 19 designees now. You can look at their genetic profiles. You can see what they're doing with the farmers, how they're preserving genetic diversity, and it's all really super interesting. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed that tale. I didn't tell it nearly as good as Rowan Jacobson could, but I hope that you learned something and found it interesting. And until next time, when we talk all things chocolate, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.